Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 2014 disaster flick, Into the Storm. Now, this is a movie that, well, one of the trailers I saw looked interesting. It was not a movie I was ever planning on seeing in the theater, though, because whenever I heard about this, and when I saw the trailer, I was like, is it Twister again? We're doing Twister again, really. But no, this isn't just Twister. This is a completely different type of movie than Twister. It's a combination of found footage and regular footage. Makes for an interesting mix. And it honestly does have some pretty good visuals in it, and I thought it was a decent flick. I thought it was above average. I didn't think it was as bad as some people made it out to be. I thought it was a pretty good movie for the most part. Um, I thought there were some things about it that are pretty cool. I mean, for example, like what you see right here is the makings of I think, no, right here is the fire tornado. They showed the fire tornado, which I thought was pretty cool. And for the most part, the characters were likable, and it was a pretty fast-paced movie. And I really liked the Titus, which was this big tank. It was pretty much a tank. That's really what it was, or a tumbler that these tornado chaser guys use to chase tornadoes with. It was pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, this is just my initial thoughts on the film. Um, but anyway, the movie came out in 2014 last year. It made about $161.5 million on a $50 million budget. 50 million? It didn't really look like a $50 million movie. I gotta be honest. It didn't really look like a $50 million film. So that budget is a bit higher than I thought the film's budget would have been. The movie's directed by Stephen Quale, who for the most part he hasn't really directed that much. I mean, he directed Final Destination 5 before this, but that was a pretty lame movie. He was the second unit director for Avatar and Titanic, and he's pretty much seems like he's a guy who will work with James Cameron. His direction is fine in this. It's nothing super spectacular, but it's competent enough, and it gets the job done. It's nothing that's really bad. It's written by John Sweetnam. It features music by Brian Tyler. I don't really remember any of the score, so it wasn't that memorable. Cinematography by Brian Pearson. It's there. I thought cinematography in Twister was definitely a lot better, but the cinematography in this, it's competent. It's edited by Eric A. Sears. I thought the editing was pretty good for the most part. And it stars Richard Armitage as Gary Fuller, the vice principal of Silverton High. Sarah Wayne Callies as Allison Stone, a meteorologist. Matt Walsh plays Peter Pete Moore, a documentary filmmaker and storm chaser. I liked him. I did like the Matt Walsh's character. You have Max Deacon, who plays Donnie Fuller, a junior at Silverton High. Alycia Debnam, Deb, Alycia Debnam, damn, Carey as Caitlin Johnston, a junior at Silverton High. Nathan Kress as Trey Fuller, sophomore. Arlen Escarpeta as Daryl Carley, a camera operator. Jeremy Sumpter as Jacob Hodges, a camera operator. Lee Whittaker as Lucas. Kyle Davis as Donk. John Reep as Revis. I think Donk and Revis are like these two. This is kind of jackass characters. Just guys who want to be storm chasers. And then a few other actors and actresses. It doesn't really star anybody that's really, really well known. The basic gist of the plot is this: you have a group of high school students who are in a car together in the night. As a storm is brewing. When the storm gets worse, they look up ahead to see a tornado approaching towards them. A girl begs for them to go, but the boy recording on the camera gets out to videotape the tornado. He gets back in the car, but the tornado picks them up before they can escape, killing them all. It is a pretty interesting way to open the film. It definitely just grabbed you right away. Um, and the tornado effects are pretty good for the most part. The CGI in this I thought was actually, for the most part, really good. In the town of Silverton, Oklahoma, a local high school senior class is preparing for graduation. The high school's vice principal, Gary Fuller, played by Richard Armitage, has asked his two sons, Trey and Donnie, to record messages from the seniors for a time capsule to be opened in 25 years. Elsewhere, Matt Walsh, a veteran storm chaser, has been attempting to intercept and film tornadoes using a heavily armored tornado intercept vehicle named Titus, but has come up short all year long. Titus is based on actually a real tornado chaser vehicle. I saw this documentary at IMAX, an IMAX documentary actually. I saw it at IMAX at OMSI, and it was about this tornado chaser guy who built a vehicle that was very, very similar to the Titus, and I think it might have actually borrowed the same vehicle, if I remember correctly, or at least the design was definitely based on the actual real life tornado chasing tank that was actually used by an actual tornado chaser. But upon learning of a major line of developing storms, the chasers confer and decide to head for Silverton in hopes of finding tornadoes. After arriving in Silverton, the team discovers a cell they had been chasing has dissipated, upsetting Pete. As the team reconvenes to determine its next move, Silverton's cell abruptly strengthens, resulting in a hailstorm and a tornado. As the team films, the funnel abruptly shifts course and heads for the high school. At the high school, the senior students are participating in the commencement ceremonies. So the weather gets shitty, and then moments later, the tornado sirens start going off. The students are then led into the school building by the head principal and staff to get away from the storm. In the aftermath of the tornado, the shaken students emerge from the damaged building to view the damage. And while Gary sets out to rescue his eldest son, Donnie, who had gone to an abandoned paper mill to help his friend Caitlin and his crush. Really, it's not really his friend; it's his crush. He helped her with a project. She's played by Alycia Debnam-Carey, who I actually thought did a good job performance-wise. And I actually didn't mind the other actors either, the guys who played Trey and Donnie. I thought Nathan Kress did a pretty good job. He did a pretty good job as Trey. And he was a likable guy. And he tries to help her with the project because he wants to get into pants. Because come on, you got to do his high school. He wants to get laid, and he wants to become really good friends with her. But they end up getting trapped when the tornado brings the building down on top of them. As Pete's storm chase team stops in a small part of town, the tornado takes shape just as Gary and Trey arrive, destroying several buildings. Everyone except Gary and Pete's meteorologist, Allison Stone, played by Sarah Wayne Callies, who I also thought did a good job in this film, performance-wise, make it to safety. Well, the two are almost killed before the twister dissipates. Then after Gary pleads for help, Pete's team agree to help Gary to get to the paper mill. So the rest of the film is just, we need to get to the paper mill before my son and this girl, they die. And then, of course, what happens is the paper mill starts filling with water, and they're starting to drown, and then the tornadoes start keeping going after them. While they're on the way to the mill, a round of erratic tornadoes encircles them, destroys a residential neighborhood and a car lot. An explosion then turns the tornado into a fire-nado, which is really cool, and which Jeremy Sumpter, tries to film, but then he's a dumbass and gets caught up in the storm and killed. It's like, you're a dumbass. You're such an idiot. It's a fire-nado. It's a fire-nado. Stay the fuck away from the fire-nado. It's a tornado made out of fucking fire, man. Get away. Get the fuck away from this thing. No footage. No pictures are worth it. So he dies like a dumbass, and this causes friction between Pete and his team. Pete concerns seems to be more on collecting data than ensuring his team's safety. Blah, 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 blah. They get their vehicles. Allison leaves with Gary to continue their trip to the paper mill. The students are trapped. At the last minute, they end up getting saved by Gary and Allison, though, and they free the two students from their death because they're drowning, which, of course, that's why I got a lot serious case of deja vu when I watched San Andreas, because it had the same sort of thing going on near the end. But I gotta be honest, I think this film was much better than San Andreas, because it was faster paced for one. It's only 89 minutes, and I thought it was just a more engaging film for the most part. And so then in the skies above Silverton, a convergence of tornadoes results in a colossal F5 tornado that threatens to level the entire town. The town's citizens take shelter at the school. Pete's team, however, learns the school storm shelter is basically shitty. It's not going to do shit because it will not be able to stop the F5. It won't be able to hold up to the massive power of the F5. So unable to alert the school staff mobile devices because their cell phones don't work anymore because the storm. Pete's team then rushes to the school to notify the citizens that they must evacuate. And while the citizens rushed aboard school buses to flee the storm that's coming right at them, Pete and his team move to track and follow the storm, but the last school bus and a handful of cars are cut off from the retreat due to a downed transmission tower. And this is a pretty good way to, pretty good climax for the film. It gets really shit starts flying everywhere. Shit really starts to hit the fan. And then in an attempt to improvise a shelter, the storm chasers and the school refugees take cover in a storm drain. But the debris from the tornado damages one of the storm grates, compromising the shelter. In an attempt to save lives, Pete hands over his research hard drives to Gary and then sacrifices himself by leaving the shelter to move Titus down to the storm gate, where a combination of vehicles' weight, these awesome ground anchors, these like metal things that go into the ground, and then a winch cable are then used to anchor the storm grate to the concrete face. And then Titus's equipment proves unable to anchor the vehicle to the ground in a pretty tense sequence, and the tornado picks up the vehicle. And from the camera aboard the Titus, Pete observes the funnel of the tornado as the vehicle is lifted above the clouds, and then it crashes back down to the ground, killing him instantly. And then shortly thereafter, the tornado then dissipates. Which sucks, because I like that guy. I like Matt Walsh, and I was like, oh man, that sucks. But it was an admirable sacrifice, and was one that I was okay with. Because if you think about it, it's a at least he sacrificed himself for a good reason, to save everyone else. And in the aftermath of the tornado outbreak, the townspeople begin the efforts to clean up and rebuild. Gary's sons move to complete their time capsule film. Many of those they interview after the tornadoes express a newfound appreciation for their lives and a hopeful outlook on life. The last footage then shows two local daredevils, Donk and Revis, hanging from a tree as they survive the storm. And that's Into the Storm. It's a fast-paced, entertaining movie. It's nothing spectacular. It's not a great film, but it's an entertaining movie. I don't think it's nearly as bad as a lot of critics made it out to be. It could have been a lot worse. It's not Twister. It's not better than Twister. I know my dad and my stepmom are like, it's better than Twister, or my dad thinks it's better than Twister, but I'm like, I disagree with that. Twister is a much better film than Into the Storm. It's got better characters. I like Matt Walsh and I like the performances by the other cast, but those characters are nowhere near as memorable as the characters in Twister. Twister has better characters, and Twister, the plot's a little bit more engaging, but at the same time, both movies are good. Both movies are good tornado movies. If you like Twister, I think you might be able to get some enjoyment out of Into the Storm. So there's some enjoyment to be had with this film. It's just when I can think about any sort of, there's a lot of pros. I think the effects are good. The performances are pretty solid for the most part. The writing is just okay. But when it comes to the cons, there's not really much. There's not really a very memorable score. Twister has a great score and has a great soundtrack. This film doesn't have that. The combination of found footage and regular footage can be jarring at points. Sometimes it's cool, but other times it's like, maybe we should just have shot normally. Because then you have a problem where you're seeing certain shots and it's supposed to be found footage, and you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense because I don't see how you can shoot it found footage this way, like the Firenado, for instance. Maybe it's a different camera that's somewhere else that's shooting the scene from a different angle. Who knows? But mainly, I just think the one thing that holds it back the most is the fact that the characters the writing is just it's there, but it's just nothing spectacular. It's nothing that stands out. The characters aren't really they're likable, but they're not very memorable. There's nothing fun about them. There's nothing memorable about these characters. They're likable, but that's about it. And the film is, somewhat predictable in a lot of ways, but a little bit cliched. But it could have been a lot worse. I enjoyed it for what it was. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the film. It was just a fun disaster movie. If you like disaster movies, you turn your brain off. I think you can enjoy a film like this, but I can see why people didn't like it because it was just, it's not very, very memorable characters. The plot's pretty cliched. Been there, done that. I mean, there's a few cool things like a fire tornado and the, cool shots of the destruction and the tornado does, the destruction that the tornado was leaving in its wake, but a little bit implausible at points too, because there's so many fucking different types of tornadoes that come into this small town to the point that it's almost a fantasy. But at the same time, it's a fun movie. I prefer Twister, but I still liked it. I thought it was still a fun film for the most part. So I really don't know what to say about Into the Storm, except if it was rated out of 5 stars, I would give it 3.5. 3.5 out of 5. It's an above average film. I liked it, but I didn't love the movie. I didn't think it was great. So that's why I give it 3.5 out of 5. I didn't think it was a great movie, but I liked it. I thought it was one of the better disaster movies I've seen lately. I definitely like this a lot more than San Andreas. It was $2 well spent, because that's all I spent on it. I spent $2 on it at a pawn shop, so I can't really complain that much. Anyway, thank you for watching my review of Into the Storm, and I will see you guys later. See ya.